Barry Loudermilk is running for Congress in Georgia's 11th district. He reminds me an awful lot of David Barton and is also good friends with General Jerry Boykin. These two men are some of the, I think they are some of America's giants today, both men of honor and integrity. And it says a lot when Barry can claim friendship with those two men. Welcome to the program, Barry. How are you?
I am doing wonderful, and man, this is a real honor to be on the show with you, Glenn. It's been listening to you for many, many years.
How come we have never met?
Well, we actually did meet at the Pro Family Leadership Conference in, I think it was 2012, that David Barton was hosting. You came in and spoke, and we talked just briefly in the back of the room. I was serving in the state senate in Georgia during the time.
Well, we'll have to spend more time together because as I begin to look into you, you know, you are the kind of guy that I think that we need more of. I don't know all of your policies, but I do want to talk to you about one thing. I'm really concerned about the direction of the right now. I think that we have enjoyed a period of time to where we have seen problems and the usurpations of our freedoms have gotten worse and worse, but there are now those who are starting to call for violence. And I am hearing, and I ask you this because you are a guy who is you're huge on the Founding Fathers in prayer. People have called and written to me and said, Glenn, if the founders didn't use violence, we wouldn't have had our freedoms today. So how could you possibly say? And I've been trying to explain that the founding period was very different, that they had far many usurpations than we have currently. We are headed in a very, very dangerous situation. Our Constitution is hanging in the balance. However, I believe our solution lies in the power of God and not in the power of the gun. And our founders were all in with divine providence and God, and I don't believe we are yet.
No, and you're exactly right. As you had stated earlier in your declaration, I mean, the last line of the Declaration of Independence, they knew what they were having to do was impossible, but they turned to God. If you go back and you look from 1765 to 1776, those major issues that they were facing, they're very similar to the issues we're facing today, but they didn't have a constitution. They weren't able to overthrow their existing government at the ballot box every 2, 4, and 6 years that we have the ability to do. And they also exhausted every effort to resolve their grievances peacefully before they turned to arms. And we're not yet to that point here in this nation. I mean, clearly we're heading in the wrong direction. But even if you go back and you look, what was the first thing that they did? Thomas Jefferson was appointed to a committee in the House of Burgess to determine what was the most dangerous thing affecting the colonists. And that committee came back to the House of Burgess with their recommendation. Is the most dangerous thing facing the liberties of the colonists was a lethargic people. They had to awaken the people. And so they called for a colony-wide day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer on June the 1st, 1774. And Jefferson said that day was like bolts of electricity surging through the colony, and he attributed that to the beginning of the American Revolution. So clearly they turned their eyes back to God first.
And here people will say, well, we've got to wake people up, and the best way to do that is we had a former sheriff announce yesterday that at this Nevada ranch, they were putting women in front of the line so the world would see the federal officers gun down women. And that's their plan for waking people up. That's insane.
Yeah, we've got an opportunity, and I tell this to people all along. The greatest thing that we're facing right now is Americans are beginning to lose hope. We can't lose hope. We can take this nation back. I know we can do it. There has never been a situation that Americans, when we pull ourselves together, that we can't overcome. It's what David Barton and you and I all call American exceptionalism. It's still alive. And we can turn this thing back around. We owe it to our children and our grandchildren. We are not to that point, pulling out our guns and fighting. I mean, in some ways, that's a coward's way out.
So I think it is. So help me out on the NSA is listening. I mean, they're not actually transcribing everybody's phone calls and everything else, but they are at least gathering and holding all of that information. You have the Department of Homeland Security is out of control to where you're in your local communities. You'll have these squad cars. It's a police force. Department of Homeland Security. You have the Postal Department buying bullets. The story is today. You have the IRS, and neither the Republicans or the Democrats seemingly are real interested in actually shutting this down. It is still going on today. Barry, what is the answer here? Where do we head?
Well, first of all, we've got to have leadership, and we have to have representation in Congress that, one, understands the Constitution and understands that Congress has given the overwhelming authority in this nation. And they have given a lot of that away to the executive branch. They're not holding the executive branch accountable. They're not using the power of the Constitution to hold the president within the scope of his limited powers. I mean, you look at the Constitution. It says all legislative power is given to Congress. It uses the word all. And clearly, through the administrative state, the president has overstepped those bounds. And a lot of this action is being done through the executive branch. And we have to have strong leadership within Congress, leadership who is not afraid to make a stand, leadership who is willing to put things on the line. One of the biggest problems we've had is even under Republican leadership over the past several years is even when Republicans are in control, we don't do anything with it. We've got to have people who are willing to say, I'm going to put it all on the line for the future of our nation, and for the most part, understand and live by the limited powers of the Constitution.
Okay, so the guy you're running against is Bob Barr. Bob Barr is a guy who led the impeachment of Clinton. And what's his name? John Boehner said if he gets back into office, he'll give him all of his power back and all of his committees and everything else, which sounds a little too comfortable for me. But I would imagine that is selling well with some people because finally somebody's going to go in there and do something about this president. How would you?
Well,
go ahead.
That's one of the things that Bob is, and I've known Bob for 12, 15 years. And one of the things that Bob has come out and said recently is one of the first things he's going to do is impeach President Obama. And then just a couple of days ago, he comes out and says, well, I really didn't mean that. And so there's inconsistency in there. But, one of the things that concerns me about this whole thing, and it's an open seat, and, it's been a decade since Bob was in Congress. He ran as president of the Libertarian ticket. Now he's back in the Republican Party. But his endorsement of Eric Holder as confirmation for Attorney General is just one of those things that's really, really difficult for me to overlook at this point.
Why do you think that Eric Holder might be a bad guy?
Like maybe the worst living human being on the planet?
Well,
there's an article on The Blaze.
I tend to listen to this radio show and watch The Blaze in the evening, and I think I've got some people that help inform the nation on the status of our Attorney General. I don't know, ask Louis Gohmert what he thinks about that.
Yeah.
That hearing last week was one of the most unbelievable things I think I've ever seen from a U.S. Attorney General at a congressional hearing. When he spoke to Gohmert like that with such disrespect and such utter contempt. And then he went to the National Action Network the next day and claimed that he was the victim. A just unbelievable display of what kind of person he is.
Yeah, and I can tell you my asparagus is still intact, and I'm very proud of it.
Let me ask you, have you been following what's happening in Nevada?
I have, mostly from what I've heard through the national media and also on The Blaze. And I'm really concerned about what's going on there from the perspective of what is the true story here? Is it federal land? Did he just not pay the lease and the other ranchers pay the lease? Or is it a violation of his property rights?
Well, I think there's several things going on. But he himself yesterday said that's not what this is really about. He wants the land turned over back to the states from the federal government. And as you may know, I didn't, but as you may know, back in, I think, 1976, Congress passed a law that said BLM land has to go back to the states. And BLM was doing that, and like they've returned, I think, 99% of Nebraska back to Nebraska. But then they stopped on a few other states. For instance, Utah and Nevada have not gotten a blade of grass back, and so those two states in particular are very intent on. We've been waiting since 1976, and you've got to turn this land over. And so that's one of the things he says on this program. The overarching issue for him is he wants the federal government disarmed and out of states' business.
Well, I definitely admire his courage, to stand up. And again, one of the things that we have to do in the conservative movement to get it back to liberty is to make sure that when we're taking a stand, we are on the right side. That we have our facts together, and especially if we go out and making a stand. It's important to make a stand, but you got to make sure that what you're standing on is right, it is true, and defensible.
Can you tell me, where do you stand on Common Core?
I'm totally opposed to Common Core. In fact, my last year in the state Senate here, I co-authored legislation to remove Georgia from the Common Core. Unfortunately, it didn't pass, and even our good friend David Barton has been helping us in that effort. And to me, Common Core, and this is the way I testified before the Senate committee, look at what's going on in Washington. They can't balance their budget. They've created chaos in the economy. They can't even manage their own affairs, and we want to turn education over to them? I mean, come on. This is something that is not in the enumerated powers of the Constitution. It is clearly what was given to the states, and now we just want to give more of that to the federal government. It makes no sense to me at all.
Who are the people in the House and the Senate that you think are the people that you would look up to or look to reinforce?
I've got to meet several folks that I greatly admire for different reasons. Of course, Louis Gohmert is one of those, the courage to stand on the Constitution. You got Trey Gowdy, who is doing some tremendous work. Jim Jordan is another one. Tom Graves is a very close friend of mine that I've known for many years. And you've got to admire the courage of Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and those guys who are holding the line. It's difficult to stand. I mean, we live in a difficult time. And now is the time for the Patriots are going to have to make some very, very bold and courageous moves.
Now, if people like what they've heard from you so far, I mean, it's just too bad that there's just nowhere to go to help you out in your cause for election. I mean, if there was a website or something where people could donate, that would have been great.
Oh, it would be incredible. And if we would have set one of those up, it would be standwithbarry.com.
Standwithbarry.com.
Huh.
Yeah.
Would there be like if in this imaginary world, like a donate button on there that you could press and actually give money to your campaign?
Absolutely. You go straight to standwithbarry.com. There is conveniently a contribute or donate now button on there, and we can definitely use all the support that we can get.
That would assume that you just didn't want John Boehner's handpicked guy, Bob Barr, to get into office.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's quite a stretch.
Unless you're really pleased with the job that Eric Holder has done as Attorney General, then you probably don't want to contribute there. But we're in the lead. It's a narrow lead, and it's coming down. It's a two-person race at this point between myself and Bob. And May 20th is our primary, so we're only 35 days away.
Wow. Okay, standwithbarry.com, standwithbarry.com. Barry, I hope to spend some quality time with you, not just in a hurry as we stand in the back of a room, because we need good, strong leadership, and I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you. It was definitely an honor, and anytime I could spend with all you guys, I would be honored. Let's take this nation back. We can do it.
Thank you very much. Barry Loudermilk, he is running for 11th District in Georgia in Congress, and if he sounds like somebody you can support, it's standwithbarry.com.